Looks like we're live, so welcome everybody. My name's Kathryn, YK is with me as well, and we're excited to be here at JCon 2021. And today's session, we're going to be talking about landscape of MicroProfile and Jakarta EE tools. So some quick introductions. So my name, like I said, is Kathryn Kodama. I work at IBM, under IBM Cloud and Cognitive, specifically on the Open Liberty Developer Experience team. So we're looking at ways that we can improve the developer experience, and part of that involves looking at and contributing to the tooling that's available for developers as they use Liberty, MicroProfile, and Jakarta EE. And I'll let YK introduce himself.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here. I'm YK Chang. Like Kathryn, I'm from IBM, and we work on the same team, and we look at MicroProfile and Jakarta EE, and we look to we work on tools that hopefully will make it easier for developers to work with the APIs here, as well as obviously with Open Liberty, which is what we work on as well. So great to be here.
Great, and like we said, we work on Open Liberty, which is open framework for building cloud native Java microservices. We have implementations of MicroProfile and Jakarta EE. And you can learn more about Open Liberty specifically at openliberty.io. Right, so we have previous iterations of this talk. So this is the most current tools we think that are out there. So the October 2021 edition. And a quick overview of today's agenda. So YK will start with some background of MicroProfile and Jakarta EE, and then talk about the different tools that are available for developers. And then I'll end things off with a demo of some of those tools in action, and we'll look at some summary charts as well. And we'll also take questions at the end.
All right. So thanks, Kathryn. So let's take a look at MicroProfile and Jakarta EE first, just as a quick introduction, and to level set. So we can then look at the tools that are available for us to work with MicroProfile and Jakarta EE APIs as developers. So MicroProfile is a community effort looking at the set of Java APIs, or providing a set of Java APIs for developers to build microservices with Java, right? Cloud native Java. It started quite a few years ago as a community effort. And now it's a working group under the Eclipse Foundation, right? So there's a bunch of APIs that are associated with MicroProfile. The core set of them are reused from Jakarta EE or Java EE, particularly the ones around building RESTful services, web services, right? But on top of that, right, the community has been working on looking at what sort of APIs you need for building microservices, and with a cloud native deployment platforms or environments in mind, right? Like Kubernetes. So in such an environment, you will need certain set of APIs to enable your applications, and as they are deployed, right, as they are brought up in a cloud environment, to interact or integrate easily with those environments. So MicroProfile has the team or the community has come up with a different set of APIs to help with that. That's open and supported by different runtimes and so on, right? For instance, when you need to, in Kubernetes, you have different, I guess, probes that we need to respond to, right? Whether it's for startup, for readiness and so on, right? So the MicroProfile health check API helps us with providing those responses, so Kubernetes can then make the right decision as to the health profile operating services, and then decide whether to restart or whatnot, right? Similarly, another example would be metrics, making it easier for applications to provide metrics to the environment, right? So that these stats can be collected and then visualized, and then you can have a pulse on how things are doing. So that's what MicroProfile is, right? Looking at the set of APIs that a developer may need to build applications, build microservices using Java, right? So today we're not going to touch on all the APIs, so it's just to give everyone a quick review, if you will. And as I mentioned, it's an open set of APIs, so different runtimes and frameworks support it, right? This is across, this is global and worldwide, right? And this is just a list of what's the set of runtimes that have passed the compatibility kits, right? Indicating that they support MicroProfile APIs to the extent that's required, right? So you can find the list at the link there over at Eclipse Wiki. but just so you know, it's Wildfly, Camillux, Open Liberty, Webster Liberty, Thorntail, Para, right? GBoss, Quarkus, Halligan, Tommy, they all have, they all are compatible with MicroProfile APIs at the different versions. So you have a choice, right? As developers, it would be good and nice for us to work with something, common set of APIs, and then with the flexibility and choice to work with different runtimes to deploy, or as you work with different customers or in different environments, right? It's all good. What about Jakarta EE? Jakarta EE is I guess the new Java EE, right? It's the evolution of Java EE in an open fashion on the Eclipse Foundation. Started a few years ago, and it's now in, if I remember, it's in it's more or less a third iteration now, 9.1, right? So it contains essentially the whole platform that we need to build applications for enterprises for cloud, right? So from the simplest, maybe a simple web service, REST service, right, with just a simple connection to a backend and so on, to the whole thing. I mean, everything that you can imagine, right? It's in the platform that we are familiar with throughout the years, right? So whether it's with badging applications or connecting to, I guess, some enterprise backends and things like that, right? So even GSF, right? I know the earlier session that Werner and Eva they were showing about, right? And security, right? It's all there, right? So it's a complete platform, but moving towards open collaboration, right? And looking at evolving Java for the next generation and for cloud, right? So that's Jakarta EE. And again, it's many different frameworks and runtimes supported, right? This is a list of the Jakarta EE page for the list of compatible runtimes for Jakarta EE 9.1. So this is the latest version of the API supporting Java 11. So you can see there's a healthy set of runtimes that are compatible with Jakarta EE 9.1. Similarly, for Jakarta EE 9, which is sort of the version before, right? The major version before the .1 ref to support Java 11 is Jakarta EE 9. So this is the first version where we moved everything, the community, I guess we moved everything from the Java X namespace to Jakarta namespace, right? Again, you can see that different runtimes around the world essentially have been working on Jakarta EE and declaring compatibility, right? So it's really exciting and good for the community at large. Last but not least, Jakarta EE 9. This was the first release done by Eclipse Foundation and the community, right? So as you can imagine, everyone possible supports it, and we expect that the community will continue to grow and the option will move forward, right? So that's quickly MicroProfile and Jakarta EE, right? Just to as an introduction. Now we have the APIs that we want to use and we will look to use to build our applications. Let's take a look at what it means I guess from a day-to-day standpoint for developers, and we'll use that sort of life cycle for iterative development to look at the tools that are out there. So as a developer, we will want to obviously write new code and edit code and start with a new project, right? And then we'll move on with development, whether we are adding a new class or making changes to existing ones, but we have a project that we'll work with. And after that, we'll need to build it and potentially package and then put it out there or put it live in a local runtime or framework or whatever, just run it, right? Deploy it. And obviously it can be a remote deployment to a remote Kubernetes cluster, but we have that steps in terms of building and packaging and so on. And then we'll need to test. We'll have test code and we need to write tests, or if we are doing test-driven development, then test may be upfront, right? So, and then the cycle repeats. The cycle repeats because it's an iterative process, as we all know. And we won't be just using a plain editor to do so. We'll be working with our favorite editor, right? So there's choices of editors and IDEs out there that we may prefer to use, and we'll work within those environments, right? Our favorite one, and to do these things. And we'll want to have coding assistance as we make code changes or whether new or existing, right? So to help us with catching errors, right? If we mistype something, or there can be quick fixes to help us make changes, or even auto completion, or just be able to insert some snippets, right? So that those will be the kind of things that the developer look to do and have available to them in terms of tooling to make life easier, right? Okay. To sort of put it, to summarize it as a model, right? Just simple one, right? Different people have different versions of it. We'll just use a simple one here, just for the sake of discussion that we'll have today. We will go through an iterative development cycle from create, build, edit, and test, and the cycle repeats, right? And then it's just a cycle. And then with that in mind, we also will be working with an editor or within an IDE environment, right? So let's take a look with this picture in mind. Let's take a look at what are some of the tools and available to developers working with MicroProfile and Jakarta EE APIs. Okay, so let's off just starting with creating new projects, right? There are starters out there for creating template projects for us to start with building MicroProfile and Jakarta EE applications, right? A well-known one, a common one is actually the MicroProfile starter done by the community at start.microprofile.io. It's a straightforward concept, right? So we are familiar with it. You just go there and you put in some basic configurations like your project name and things like that. And then it'll give you a zip of a template project, a starting point with the dependencies that you're looking for, depending on the versions of MicroProfile API, for instance, that you're choosing to use. And then you can then use that template as a starting point to write your applications, right? And then at the same time, this MicroProfile starter is also available as an extension to Visual Studio Code as well as IntelliJ. So make it easier for developer to get going, creating and building MicroProfile applications. At the same time, similar efforts exist for Jakarta EE, right? It's at start.jakarta.ee. You can grab a template project from that site and then use that as a reference or starting point to build applications. Now, beyond what the Jakarta and EE and MicroProfile community provides, there's also runtime specific starters, right? Depending on the runtimes that you want to use or you've decided to use, right? For instance, OpenLiberty has one, Quarkus has another, Paya has their own facilities to help people create starter projects, right? So you can just start with these starters, right? Use these starters to give you a quick starting point without having to keep recreating boilerplate code or project to get going with coding new projects, right? You can just go to, for instance, start.openliberty.io and then do the same, and then give you a bootstrap that you can work with building applications for using MicroProfile and Jakarta EE APIs, working with OpenLiberty. So that's getting started, right? Creating something that new. Then we'll need to build our applications, right? So in the Java space, we all know the common build tools would be Maven and Gradle, right? And then with Maven and Gradle, you have tons of plugins that you can choose to work with to help you with your build lifecycle or with your DevOps process and things like that as you seek to build your applications, package them up, and so on and so forth, right? Is there anything available for working with my choice of MicroProfile or Jakarta EE runtime? Yes, there is, right? So the different runtimes and frameworks, they have their own, potentially have their own build plugins to make it easier for you to manage your application and runtime lifecycle as part of your build process, right? So it's there. There's things like Liberty Maven plugin, or Paya has one, and Tommy has their own, and Quarkus too, right? So there are these plugins available to help you with building your applications with your choice of runtime in Maven or Gradle available. Now, as we know, as we build things, especially as we do the iterative development, I mean, the manual case, right? Manual case, and in a sense, the simplest case would be for us to just, I make a change, I save, and then I would issue a build command, and then I'll package it up, and then I'll make it live again, or I even can script something myself to simplify that if I want, right? So, but you have to go to that rebuild, repackage, and potentially redeploy cycle manually. That's I guess first principle, if you will, but you have to do that manually. What if we don't need to do that manually. And then these are taken care of for us, right? They are indeed optimized capabilities provided by the different runtimes, and different folks have done such optimizations to make life easier for developer, right? So they would take away the need for you to do manual rebuild, repackage, and redeploy, but then they will handle that for you. And then as soon as you save your changes, then that will be picked up, compiled, and so on, make live. Then you can really focus on your code changes. And then there's, in some cases, there are even facilities for continuous or hot testing, and also container support, right? And so these are what some runtimes provide out of the box. And also there's hot reload capabilities, obviously, through the IDEs and third-party tools that gives similar capabilities too. So this is really useful to keep in mind, because it helps make life for the developers easier and simpler and actually happier, right? So that's something that to keep in mind. And we'll see some of these in action later as Kathryn show us the cool stuff. And then after build, we'll need to edit. And as we mentioned, you will want to work with an editor or an IDE that your favorite one, right? There's a set of these out there: Eclipse, IntelliJ, Visual Studio Code, NetBeans, and so on, right? And yes, you can use pretty much any editor, and then they will allow you to work with a runtime and MicroProfile API or Jakarta EE API within that environment. So, and then the IDE themselves will provide the standard capabilities. At the same time, different runtimes have also provided different plugins or extensions to the IDEs to make it easier for you to work within your IDE, your favorite IDE, to make life easier for developers, right? So for instance, if you go on Visual Studio Code Marketplace, Visual Studio Marketplace to search for MicroProfile, you can see then the different set of extensions available for you to work with your choice of runtime as well as MicroProfile, right? So on top of that, we mentioned as part of editing, we'll want assistant to work with, to use the APIs, right? So whether we make a mistake intentionally or not, or just to have some quick help to figure out what's going on, so we don't need to type as much, right? Like code completion and things like that. Then there is coding assistant, and the community has been working on different language server projects to enable things in a common fashion for developers to work with MicroProfile and Jakarta EE APIs, right? The language server for Eclipse MicroProfile is one example where the community is working to build a language server that provides coding assistance to users working in any choice of editors. Just as long as we have a plugin to the language server, then you can get coding assistance for working with MicroProfile. And it's an open source project, so always welcome to contribute. And then similarly for Jakarta EE, there's also a similar effort going, looking at providing a language server for Jakarta EE APIs, right? So then the language server can then again be plugged into different editors, and from the editors through a common language server, you'll get coding assistant, whether it's with diagnostics or quick fixes or code completion and things like that for the APIs that you want to use from Jakarta EE. So there are these efforts underway to give developers more and more capabilities and to help them work with Jakarta or MicroProfile APIs. And we can't not talk about code generators, right? There's additional tools, for instance, through Open API tools to help with generating MicroProfile REST client templates, the template interface. And it's available. So it's available both as a CLI as part of the tools or as a Visual Studio Code extension. And there's also stub generation for JAX-RS, essentially REST web services using JAX-RS too, right? So these are additional editing capabilities available as part of writing code that if you have, for REST client in this case, if you have the target service that you want to work with, just give it an open API doc, then it will generate you the template that you can work with, right? To minimize or reduce the amount of time we need to code manually, and also avoid mistakes, right? So testing, as we move on, so we go from building, we make changes, and then we need to test, right? Upfront or later and so on. That's an integral and important part of the life of developer and for QA. We have the usual suspects, obviously they will all still work, whether it's with JUnit or Quillian, right? And then is there anything else? Certain runtimes have provided additional facilities to make it easier for you to work with them, like Quarkus and Tommy. At the same time, I guess containers makes life easier and actually advances how they help advance how we can do testing, right, with containers technology. So there's efforts like test containers or microshed testing, looking at using containers to make two things, right? One, make life easier to test as developers. Two, to help us do true to production testing earlier in the cycle. So as you can imagine, if we can work with containers that we will be using in production and use them upfront in development or as we test through the pipelines, right? It give us additional quality assurance that what we're working with will be like as close to as much as possible to what's in production, right? And then it actually simplify lives and there is relevant support there for also in its early stage looking at providing exposing test containers technologies for MicroProfile and Jakarta EE through microshed testing. That's a community effort. And lastly, as developers, we cannot not touch on the fact that we need resources to help us for references or otherwise, right? Or just even to inspire us. There is extensions for MicroProfile where there's sample code and common I guess samples. I would just use the term samples available for things like MicroProfile config sources or common things that we may do. And the MicroProfile extension effort or project does provide a healthy set of examples there for us to look at. And then there's also the Eclipse Cargo Tracker application, right? This is an end-to-end, it's a complete application for showcasing Jakarta EE and done using domain-driven design, right? And there's also Open Liberty Guides, which is sort of a hands-on set of guides for developers to look at learning different things around MicroProfile and Jakarta EE and more, right? And recently the team added cloud-hosted environment for any developer that can just go there and then just pick up what you want and then just get going and started with using and learning about MicroProfile and Jakarta EE API. All right, so I did these in the last 10 minutes or so, trying to give everyone an overview of what we have and the different tools that we've managed to check out and so on that's available for MicroProfile and Jakarta EE developers. And now let me hand over to Kathryn, and Kathryn will show us some of these in action.
Great, thanks, YK. All right, let me share my screen here. So, yep, just like YK said, today I'm going to demo some of those tools. We'll try to cover as many tools as possible. And we'll start with project creation, building, editing, and end with some testing as well. So today I'm in VS Code, but as YK said, similar tools exist for command line or IntelliJ if you prefer another editor. So I just want to quickly touch on what extensions I have installed here in VS Code. So I have a number of MicroProfile specific extensions, and you can grab them all with the extension pack for MicroProfile. So this includes the MicroProfile starter to generate new projects, the generator for MicroProfile REST client, and then tools for MicroProfile, which has your language support as well. And then I have some runtime specific extensions installed as well. So I have Open Liberty tools, Pyera tools, and Quarkus tools. And this offers integration with your VS Code if you're using any of these runtimes. So today, let's just create two simple microservices, a REST service and a REST client, connect them to each other and try to use as many tools as we can along the way. So first thing is project creation, right? So as YK said, there is the Open Liberty starter, so on openliberty.io, and this will help you generate a new application. So you can see I can just specify my group ID, my artifact ID. So in this case, I want it to be like REST service. I can pick my build tool, my Java version, my Jakarta EE version, and my MicroProfile version. And if I click generate here, it'll give me a zip file of a starter project. So in the interest of time, I've actually gone ahead already and generated this. So I have this REST service project here. And you'll notice I also have this Liberty dashboard view here, the tool window in my VS Code extension. So this will populate, it'll detect my Liberty applications here. And I can actually click on it to start up my Liberty application. So in this case, I'm starting it in dev mode, which is Open Liberty development mode. And this kind of starts up our application for us. Now we can sort of forget about it as we code. So you can see we have Liberty's running in dev mode, and it also gives me information about what port I can use, my debug port, and it'll just pick up our changes as we go. So here, if I take a look at what my application actually has in it, so This was just the generated application. So I have this API REST application path here, and I have this hello controller class here. So it's just at the hello path, and you can see it just has a hello message. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. All right, so we see hello, and then I just want to show that as you make changes, so say I make a change to my code, and then we'll see in the terminal, so Open Liberty Dev Mode is picking up those changes. So we can see it recompiled our source code for us. And then when we refresh the endpoint, we can see that change take effect. So you can don't have to manually redeploy every time. That's kind of handled for you. All right, so what else is in this project? I've just added a few other classes here. So for today's demo, I thought we could just use a simple cafe model. So I have this drink class that has a name and a cost. And then I have this cafe service class at this cafe endpoint. I've just populated with a few drinks here, and we can see what that looks like as well. Cafe, we can see I've just got a few sample drinks. All right, so let's go ahead and use one of the MicroProfile APIs now. So let's say I want to add something like MicroProfile Health to add a health check to my application. All right. So here I am in my server XML. This is where I can enable features for my Liberty application. So I'll add in MicroProfile Health here. And you'll see dev mode picked that up and that it's installed MicroProfile Health for us. And we can double check that by going to our health endpoint. And we can see there's no checks right now because we've only just enabled the application. So let's go ahead and create one. So I'll just call it cafe readiness check here. All right, and so rather than typing out the whole thing, this is where something like tools for MicroProfile comes in handy. So that's the MicroProfile language support. So actually, if I just type here MicroProfile readiness, we have a full snippet here of a MicroProfile health readiness check, and it autofills for us. So basically, we got this template code, we're up and ready to go. And of course, you could modify this to be more complex, but I'll keep just the generated stub here for today's purposes. And if we refresh, we can see that readiness check is there and it's telling us our application is up and running. All right, so that's our Open Liberty application, and I will leave this running. One other thing I want to show is we also have MicroProfile Open API enabled here as a feature, and we can double check that by checking out our Open API endpoint here. So this will give us an overview of the different paths we have. So we can see our cafe endpoint there, our drink schema, our hello endpoint. And we'll use this as we connect to our REST client as well. All right, so that's our first microservice. And like I said, I want to create a second microservice here and connect the two. So we can do that a few different ways. And there are a few tools, a few starter tools other than the Open Liberty one that will help us. So for this one, I'll use Payara tools or create a Payara instance. So there's two ways we can do this. We can generate a Payara micro project, or if you're looking for more MicroProfile specific, you can use the MicroProfile starter to generate a new MicroProfile project. And again, here, similar, we can specify a group ID. This will be our REST client, and you can pick your MicroProfile version and then the server you'd like to use. So Payara Micro. Your Java version, you can pick build tool. There's recently added support for Gradle. And then you can pick the specs that you'd like to use. You can just grab a few. And when you hit OK, this will generate the project again and unzip it, and you can add it to your current workspace. So again, in the interest of time, I've actually gone ahead already and generated this project. And you can see I have this Payara tool window here as well in VS Code. So this is coming from the Payara extension. And we can see our application has been populated here. So I'll hit start to start up that application. And the main difference here is it's using the output tab of VS Code versus Liberty was using the integrated terminal. So just different ways kind of to do the same thing. And we'll let that start up. And also take a look at what this application has. So, oh, there it started. So quickly here, this is just the auto-generated homepage. We can see we've got a number of MicroProfile APIs already, and we can see we have this hello world endpoint that's there for us automatically. And if we take a look at what that looks like, we have this REST client class again, and then we have this hello world endpoint. Again, we can make changes to this as we go. The difference here being I'll just hit the refresh in my Payara tool window here. It'll refresh, and then I can hit that endpoint again, and we see our changes are in effect. Okay, so let's go ahead and connect these two applications now. So I want this Payara application to be my REST client, and I'm going to use the MicroProfile REST client to actually generate this. So I'll click generate a MicroProfile REST client here, and it'll let me specify an open API file or a URL. So we'll put in that URL from our Open Liberty REST service application here. And this will confirm where we want to generate into, our package name here, and it'll generate for us. So we can see it says successfully generated. And you'll notice I have two new folders here. So I have this models folder that has our drink class here. So this has been auto-generated for us. I'll just remove some of these imports we aren't using, but we have our cost and our name specified for our drink. This came from our drink schema. We have some setters and getters for that as well. And then we have this API folder here. So here we have some API exception classes that were auto-generated, an API exception mapper class that was auto-generated, and this default API class. So this default API class is kind of where we want to spend the most time. So we have this API cafe get, and this has our API cafe class, our endpoint path here. We have a post, and then we have our hello one as well. So I'll go ahead and just also add this base URI, and I'll use our REST service application here. And you can see we have these sort of code lens hovers. These are also coming from tools for MicroProfile. So now we have our API class here. Let's actually create a controller for that. And I have the stub for that already created. So I have this cafe controller class, and then we'll go ahead and start by injecting our API. So I'll use MicroProfile REST client here to inject it, and it'll be our default API class here, and we'll call it cafe service. All right, so just something else tools for MicroProfile offers is diagnostics. So let's say for some reason I forgot my add inject and I just put REST client. Tools for MicroProfile will give you a diagnostic. They'll catch your mistakes for the MicroProfile API. So we can see it says we should have the add inject annotation, and we can have a quick fix to correct that for us as well. All right, so next, let's just have a method here. I'll just copy and paste it. All right, so I have this get method here for our drink class. All right, and we enable those. All right, so this should be all we need to get started. I have these two connected, so let's go ahead and try to access that. So we're on our 8080 application here, so our REST client application. And let's see, get menu. Oh, you know what? We have to refresh with the Payara tool window here. Okay, looks good. And then let's refresh. All right, so now we can see just that quickly, and using those tools, we've connected our REST client and our REST service. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop my Payara application here and switch back to our Open Liberty REST service application. All right, so now that we've gone through all that, next step is testing, right? We always want to write our integration tests for our applications. Then what's there to help us writing them for MicroProfile or Jakarta EE? As YK mentioned, we have microshed testing. So if I just want to show you quickly in the POM, I have my microshed test dependency here, JUnit, and microshed testing uses test containers. So I have the test containers dependency as well. And this helps us write our tree to production integration tests. So the first thing, I want to just add the microshed test annotation to tell to say we're going to be using a microshed test here. And then we want to add in our container. So this is using test containers. We use that container annotation. And then we'll also use our application container here. So this is representing our MicroProfile Jakarta EE application. And we want to say what our context root is. So in this case, it's REST service. And then we also want to say, how do we know it's ready? So it'll check first that we have this readiness path, and this is our health ready endpoint we already added in. So this will check that endpoint first to make sure our application is ready before it continues on with our tests. And next, we want to add our REST client annotation. This is the one from microshed testing, not to be confused with the one from MicroProfile. And here we'll just use our cafe service. And then we can write a really quick, simple JUnit test. So for example, let's say I want to test the size of our inventory. And then just do cert equals cafe service, get all drinks, size, and we know there should be 3 in there. All right, so then if I pull back up the Liberty Dev dashboard or we take a look at the terminal, our application is still running in. We see as I was typing, our tests were compiling. And I can also go ahead and run the test. So I can either hit enter in this terminal here, I can select run tests from the dashboard, and this will run our integration tests for us. And so we can see our tests ran, they passed, all is good. Something else I want to point out about Liberty Dev Mode is there is hot testing. So if I go ahead and stop my application here, all right, and start it again, I have the start ... ellipses. Of course, you could do this on command line too if you prefer. I'm going to add in this hot test equals true custom parameter. And what this will do is it'll run tests on every code change, and we can see the message from dev mode. It'll tell us that as well. So we can see Liberty is running in dev mode, and then tests will automatically run when changes are detected. And right away off the bat, it ran our test for us as well. So let's say I go back into my cafe class here, our cafe service class here, and I just remove one of our drinks, right? On save, we can see our test starting to run. And then we can see our test failed because it expected 2, but was 3. Similarly, or sort of same along the topic of Liberty Dev Mode, we can run Liberty Dev Mode in a container. So I'll go ahead and stop here and then hit start in container. And if we take a look at the command it started, it's this devc command. This means dev mode for containers. And then I have the Docker file here that was generated. I just made a few adjustments, but I'm using the Open Liberty kernel to create our application here. And we can see in our terminal, now we are running in a container. So we can see to rebuild the Docker image, we have the container port information, what each port is mapped to, our container name. And then we can continue as usual. So same way dev mode works otherwise. So that kind of takes us through project generation, building, editing, testing. But it was pretty MicroProfile specific. Of course, we had some Jakarta EE APIs being used, but not all of them, or not the latest. We're using Jakarta EE-8. So I want to quickly show a tool that's in development for Jakarta EE-9. All right, so this is Eclipse, and this is an Eclipse instance with the LSP for Jakarta project, Eclipse LSP for Jakarta project running on it. So that offers language support for your Jakarta EE APIs. So quickly, rather than using MicroProfile 4 with Jakarta EE-8, I now have Jakarta EE-9 here in my Palm, so the latest. And this will use our new namespace change to Jakarta versus JavaX. Now we can see that here, rather than JavaX, we have our Jakarta namespace being used here. All right, so similar to the MicroProfile language support we saw through VS Code, we're working on adding that for Jakarta as well. So let's say I want to add a new servlet class. So we have similar code snippets available that will help you with your commonly used code, give you a base to start. So here I typed HTTP get, and it gave us an HTTP servlet with a get method already there. And I just have to resolve our package and class name, and then we can go ahead and start using and building off of this. Similarly, we also have diagnostics. So let's say I go back to my drink model here, and I have JSON B being used, and then also Jakarta being validation. So let's say I wanted to add a new field here. We'll say it's a Boolean, and we'll say, is our drink coffee based? Right, we might want to add the @assert true validation from Jakarta being validation. And I just have to import that. right, and say for some reason I accidentally typed this as an integer, we see this diagnostic being delivered saying assert true, and it's in the error if that's easier to read. It says assert true annotation can only be used on Boolean fields. That kind of indicates that we should go ahead and fix that. Similarly, let's say I added it to this cost field here. It'll tell us, we shouldn't use it here, and then we can even have a quick fix to remove that annotation for us and resolve that. So sort of similar support, but we're looking at adding that for Jakarta EE as well. All right, so that was a quick demo. Hopefully you saw some new tools you hadn't heard of before. Now let's take a look at some of the charts just to summarize what's there. All right, so looking at developer tools, so what's there for MicroProfile? Through starters, we have the MicroProfile starter, we have the Jakarta EE, and then we have runtime specific tooling. So like we saw, the Open Liberty starter, there's Payera starter, Quarkus, etc. For build and run, we have runtime specific Maven and Gradle build plugins. So that was Liberty dev mode. We had the auto hot deploy for Payera and then dev mode for Quarkus as well. For IDE and editor integration, we had the Eclipse LSP for MP project, which we saw through the tools for MicroProfile VS Code extension. So that was delivering us our diagnostics specific to MicroProfile and then our snippets as well. And then we have what's currently in progress or work in progress is our Eclipse LSP for Jakarta. So that's what I just showed there at the end. Any diagnostics and language support specific to the Jakarta EE APIs. For code generators, we have open API tools, and we saw the MicroProfile REST client generator. And then for automated testing, of course, we have JUnit, Aquilian test containers, and I showed quickly some microshed testing. And then, as YK said before, there's runtime specifics, so Quarkus, Tommy's, Application Composer. In terms of the different runtimes and their IDE and editor integration, there's quite a lot available. So we can see there's pretty much support across the board for the usual Eclipse, IntelliJ, NetBeans, VS Code, with some runtime specific extensions. So we saw Open Liberty tools. There'll be a Helidon VS Code extension coming. There's Quarkus tools, Payera tools. And then of course, there was Open Liberty dev mode that works in any editor or command line that helps you as well. Right, so just sort of to sum it up here. So these are exciting times for open cloud native Java. The community is very vibrant, very active, and there's more support and tools than there ever was before for MicroProfile and Jakarta EE, and even more to come, even more in development. So what did you think? Let us know, what did we miss? What tools have you learned about? Are there tools you think we missed or any features you'd like to see? A lot of this is developed in the open source. So we appreciate feedback, welcome contributions, and of course you can connect with either of us on Twitter to talk about this more. So thank you, and I think that brings us into the Q&A if there's any questions.
Thanks, Kathryn. Yeah, so it's some time. We have a few minutes there for questions. So if you have any questions at all, now or later, just let us know. We'll be happy to have a chat. So. Let me see. Okay, yeah, if you have questions, feel free to post in the chat, or if you even have comments, just share with us. Right, so will be great. It will be great to get your thoughts on what you see and what you think the community needs to do, right? So, and again, as Kathryn was saying, we would welcome any and all contributions and collaboration to work on some of these tools, right? For instance, the Eclipse LSP for MP and the Eclipse LSP for Jakarta, they are both open source projects, and then actually projects on the Eclipse Foundation, right? As part of the tooling efforts to build what we need for developers working with Jakarta EE and MicroProfile APIs. So if you have time and you would like to contribute, we would love to work with you on that. So we have a question. How is Open Liberty relates to WebShare Liberty? Open Liberty is the open source foundation for WebShare Liberty. And then that's the simplest answer. And that's it. So WebShare Liberty is built on top of Open Liberty, and now WebShare Liberty has additional legacy features or heritage features, but otherwise Open Liberty has everything that you'll need to build Java microservices using MicroProfile and Jakarta EE or cloud native applications, right? So you can use it with, I guess it's open source, so you can use it through the open source license. And if you need support, obviously you can contact IBM. Yes, is OpenLibrary production quality? It is production quality. In fact, we do have users working with OpenLibrary directly, and it's the same code base as Virtual Liberty. It's just a matter of licensing difference, where OpenLibrary, you can get it through open source, right? You can actually simply contact us. It's an open source project, so you can contact the team working on OpenLibrary directly through GitHub. But the code is the same, so it is production quality, and we do support. From an IBM standpoint, IBM does support OpenLibrary for production and has been so for quite a few years. So. So when will OpenLibrary and Jakarta EE-9 be released? As you know, we have support, we have full compatibility with Jakarta EE-9 and 9.1. Actually, we were the first one to have full compatibility with EE-9, Jakarta EE-9 as part of our beta. And then similarly, we are one of the first. In fact, we were there day one when 9.1 was GA as a compatible implementation. So we do expect that full support outside of beta or graduating from beta will come very soon. So. And you can track, I guess you can track our backlog and whatnot because it's open source. So you can just go on GitHub, github.com/openlibrary and find out more and so on. I mean, if you want to work with Jakarta EE-9 now, I mean, just grab the latest OpenLibrary beta build and it will work. And it's fully compatible with the TCKs and so on. So. Let me see. Okay. Yeah. Again, if anyone have any questions, let us know, and we certainly welcome your feedback on what we've seen or what we missed, as Kathryn was saying, because we do want to work with everyone, collaborate with everyone to continue to make sure life is as best as possible for developers choosing to work with MicroProfile and Jakarta EE APIs.